Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 16th of March 2024. This is a geopolitical video. There's not a crazy amount for me to talk about, but I am going to play a video that somebody has sent me, Christopher, one of my viewers, thank you. It's a really good look at what's going on with the American politics with regard to Ukraine aid. So that's a good video to dip into. First of all, we're going to look to the EU progressively putting more pressure on importers of Russian liquefied natural gas to cut purchases this year. Energy Commissioner Simpson has said it's part of Europe's push to shift supplies and undermine the financing of Putin's war machine. I think the EU's had this issue, and many countries within the EU kind of more bilaterally, but the EU in general, in the issue of needing your countries to and your people to have energy, right? So everyone needs energy, and the war started, and it's really difficult to say, right, we're not having any Russian energy now, any hydrocarbons, any gas or oil, we're going to turn it off. It's like, okay, brilliant, where are we going to get our energy? And so this change to taking hydrocarbons from Russia to becoming more energy independent, so producing your own through renewables or taking in those hydrocarbons from elsewhere, whether it be the Middle East or the US, that takes time. The infrastructure needs to be put in place. And so, yes, 2 years later, the EU is progressively putting more pressure on importers, but we're getting to the point where, right, we should all be able within Europe to take on hydrocarbons from elsewhere other than Russia. So that's really good news that is a continued pressure. Finland has banned cars with Russian license plates from entering the country. Vehicles already in the country may be subject to duty and VAT after which they must leave the EU. So that's something that a number of the Baltic states are doing. Well, Finland is also doing there. Microsoft, Amazon and Google on March the 20th will stop access to cloud services to Russian legal entities. What's being pointed as noteworthy is access to MS Dynamics CRM and Power by or BLBL tool. Not really sure what any of that means, but good news that is putting added pressure on Russia. So it's all about sanctions working in so many different ways, or if it's not sanctions, then it's kind of voluntary sanctioning or voluntary, like, you know, we saw BP and Shell and Exxon Mobil pull out of Ukraine due to sanctions, but you know, they also made decisions to divest and not support Russia. Well, you've also got here very important cyber entities pulling out or not supporting Russia, and then that forces them to come up with their own solutions, which becomes less efficient, more expensive maybe, or they're just unable to do these things, which means that Russia struggles in many ways. And what you want to do is put so much pressure on Russia that the Kremlin starts feeling it. They start feeling the heat from businesses and people within Russia saying, hey, actually this war is not worth it anymore. It's not helping us at all. We don't like it. We can't buy this, or we can't provide this service, or we can't use that service. So yeah. Now, the White House advisor John Kirby has said that USA is not against the deployment of troops of other countries in Ukraine. I think this is really important. Is maybe not answering the question of whether the US is going to provide troops, but say, hey, we don't mind if other countries do it. I think that's great. He stated this during a briefing at the White House, quote, "This is a sovereign decision that each nation evaluates and makes. I can only speak on behalf of the sovereign nation," that is the US, obviously, and this commander-in-chief. He made it clear, we will not deploy our troops. So, okay, US not deploying troops, and they've said we're not going to be deploying troops, and I think that's probably sensible from the US, Russia or Soviet Union historical point of view. But to say that, hey, we're not against other nations doing it, I think it's really important. Right, we're going to move on to US politics now, more generally, because that's pretty much all I have to say in general there. Is there anything else? Actually, no, let's go to before we actually go there, let's just go to Germany. Germany's ruling coalition supports a transfer of Taurus missiles to Ukraine. During a session of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, politicians from the SPD, FDP and Greens voted in favour of a resolution stating that Ukraine needs Taurus missiles. So this is from a European Parliament point of view, not from the Bundestag in Germany. So this is interesting that the coalition members of the European Parliament, MEPs from the ruling coalition inside the Bundestag, have voted in the European Parliament for Taurus missiles. I don't. It's obviously not binding. I don't, if anyone from Germany can enlighten us on this decision, it would be great. But interesting that there is very much an appetite for Taurus to be given from those MEPs. Right. Now going to the US political scene. This is massively important. We're going to. This will be mentioned as well in the interview or in the discussion we've got coming up on a video that I think is brilliant. But I can't emphasize how important this is, right? So you've got Trump vying to be president of the US in November 2024, and you've got lots of people worrying about what will happen with regard to Ukraine aid. We have got Viktor Orban saying that I've just had a chat to Trump, and he said not a penny from the US will go towards Ukraine. And so if we're going to take Trump at face value here, and what his sons are saying as well, I mean, like everyone around Trump is saying that ain't no help going to come from the US for Ukraine. Okay, so if you're big on Ukraine aid, then you shouldn't be voting for Trump in November 2024, or at least you've got to be completely blown away by his other policies, domestic policies, to vote for Trump, because he ain't going to be good for Ukraine. Okay, what's really important is that the guy who was his number two for 4 years during his tenure from 2016 to 2020 has come out and not endorsed Trump. John Kelly, who was his chief of staff, has said another. So you've got Pence, Mike Pence, his vice president, saying, I ain't going to endorse Trump. He's a problem. You've got John Kelly, his chief of staff, saying a second Trump rule would be a catastrophe. And you've got John Bolton saying the same thing, who was his, commander in chief or head of DOD. So you've got some of the most important people and who were in the war room with him on a daily, weekly basis, and Pence with him the whole time, saying this guy should not be president. I don't know what else you need, what other warnings you need if you are still a massive fan of this guy. It's so problematic. And meanwhile, his son-in-law, and it is now hitting the mainstream media, so MSNBC here is talking about is every level of corruption as Jared Kushner continues the Trump family grift overseas. He's getting given massive properties in Serbia and Belgrade and elsewhere, which are pro-Russian countries, generally speaking. And he's grifting. Like, what is going on there? Okay. Now, you then have people, Mick Ryan referring here to Lawrence Friedman, who's written a piece, quote, we will find out soon enough whether NATO has a Trump problem. This may create circumstances in which more radical reappraisal of security arrangements will become necessary. And this is, what happens if Trump wins. This is from a UK point of view. Like, people are genuinely worried. So if you're a massive Trump fan, and you might think I'm just being, anti-Trump, like, everyone around the world, like all the EU politicians, defense and NATO organizations, the defense ministry in the UK, everyone is, if not outright worried, putting things in place and trying to work out what the ramifications are of a Trump victory in November 2024. Now, I've said before, I don't think it's actually likely he will win, but who knows? But it is a worry for many people around the world. And what I'm doing is trying to communicate to you that it's a worry. It's a worry for the people in European politics and in NATO, but also for Trump's previous vice president, for his previous commander-in-chief, and so on and so forth. So, the people in the know are genuinely worried about this. Anyway, that's worth reading Lawrence Friedman. Here is this is a really interesting PBS panel, and you have people like Jim Sciutto, who's just written a book that I would like to read. That's why he's on the panel as a reporter, but lots of people here saying some really fascinating stuff here. This is good analysis. Check it out.
Johnson says that he intends to bring a bill to the floor.
So sorry, it starts with talking about Mike Johnson, and we will be listening to this for quite a long time now.
With Ukraine aid. What are the chances that that actually reaches the president's desk anytime soon?
Ukraine aid, that was a job the White House wanted done in 2023. Yeah. Here we are in mid-March, and it's still not done. The Speaker's office has said, told us today, in fact, they're going to have to wait till government spending and funding is buttoned up next week before they can move on to foreign aid in Ukraine. So there's another week that's going to burn by before next Friday's deadline. And they're going to have to pass it with Democratic votes, too, which is such a novel thing that the Congress is functioning now, needing the minority to provide all the requisite votes for all the vital things. There are these two discharge petitions that end run they run to circumvent leadership and force something onto the floor. Those are sluggish right now. They're not going to move in the next few days. It's going to take time. And time is burning. And I think for some Americans, no matter what they think of TikTok, they got that bill from the floor to passage in 8 days. Yeah. And Ukraine money is sitting there month after month.
And Ukraine.
That is super bloody important, right? If they can sort a TikTok bill out like that, and which is actually, pretty divisive with the young people, and yet 5 months of nothing going on with Ukraine aid, then that tells you that Ukraine is just a super partisan thing, and I'm sorry, but the Republicans are holding things up.
Ukrainian forces are suffering. They are running out of ammunition. They're already being outfired, outshelled by Russian forces there. And I've been told by Ukrainian commanders that I keep in touch with who are on the ground there that they are losing lives, that this is costing Ukrainian lives to have U.S. aid stalled.
I think it's so important to remind folks that when we report on the daily sort of updates of congressional negotiations, there are lives at stake. I spent time recently with a Ukrainian family that's currently on parole, temporary refugee status, for lack of a better word, and they said that their relatives in Ukraine are calling them each morning to ask specifically about whether or not the U.S. will pass aid and whether or not they're closer. And it seems we are no closer at this point.
I mean, Todd, when the Senate passed Ukraine aid in May of 2022, only 11 Republicans opposed it. But a vote earlier this year, more than 24 Republicans opposed it. What's changed?
The House Republican Conference is MAGA land. The Congress is in this situation not because of Congress writ large, but because of Republicans. Republicans are in this situation because Donald Trump is against this aid. He relied on Viktor Orban, authoritarian leader of Hungary, this week to filter his message to the world that he is not going to spend a penny on Ukraine if he's reelected. And
it's really interesting that the idea that rather than saying that himself, which would be highly controversial and would have caused a massive, I think, a much bigger outcry, he got Viktor Orban to be his messenger. That's essentially what happened there. And then it's up to people like me to get up in arms, but then it kind of filters through to mainstream media, but it's not quite as big as Trump saying it himself.
I think it's important to look at this holistically. We don't have time to go down the entire history of Donald Trump's relationship with Russia, but started in 2016, if you like, when he looked into the camera and asked Russia to interfere in the election on his behalf. They did. 2018, he went in front of the world in Helsinki and sided with Vladimir Putin instead of his own intelligence services.
And as I keep saying, that is tied with his single worst foreign policy moment. It's like the ditching the Kurds was the worst. And what he did at that Helsinki press conference was disgusting, where he asked Putin and said, "Oh, I believe Putin," over his own intelligence agencies. As I've said many a time, if I was working in the intelligence agencies for the US, for my president, right, and he just ditched me and my dangerous work that I that I do on a daily basis for the national security of the US, and my president, who I kind of make an oath to the Constitution or whatever, but the president who's supposedly upholding the Constitution and doing his very best for the US, then ditches me and my work and the entire US intelligence services for a dictator, and just takes a dictator's word for it, and then says that in Helsinki. That was a terrible moment, Trump's worst moment.
Russia interfered in 2020. Trump campaign officials, in fact, campaign chairman Paul Manafort, gave private polling information to a Ukrainian Russian agent named Konstantin Kalimnik. That is in the Senate Intelligence Report. I recount all this to give you the holistic vision of somebody who's running for president who has completely divided his party because he has upended decades and decades of pro-NATO, pro-Western, anti-Putin stance.
And it's not secret.
So again, like, I don't want to just be consistently on this anti-Trump barrage here, but I don't understand how you can deny that Trump is pro-Russia, is anti-Ukraine, when all the evidence is there, and you just look back historically, this is a trajectory that he has long been on. Like, I just, like, be honest with yourselves, guys, if you are Trump supporters, and say, yeah, he sucks on Ukraine, and actually, therefore, broadly, the entire kind of it's all connected. So the entire foreign policy strategizing, he's crap at that, but he's going to build a wall. So that's all that matters for me. I think that a wall is much more important than all this stuff. If that, just be honest with us and with yourself, because, you know, when you look at what his approach is internationally, and when you look at what people have said who know him very well, and said he's not clever enough to have a policy on China, he just doesn't understand it enough. Like, you've got to worry that, well, maybe you don't worry. It's like, okay, we'll just become isolationists and forget foreign policy. You had Tucker Carlson last night saying we shouldn't worry about Taiwan, it's too far away. Like, dude, do you not understand how the global geopolitical chess that's going on? It's just like, oh, that piece of the board, I can't see. Like, this 64 square board is pretty big. I can't see those. What's that? Is that a rook, or is that a bishop? Oh, well, it's too far away. Don't need to bother. Oh, I've lost the game. Oh, who knew?
I mean, he's made public statements praising Vladimir Putin as a strong leader. And I spoke to several of Trump's former senior advisors for the book, and they told me that in a second Trump term, Ukraine aid is done. It's finished. And that's just one piece of a larger reversal in U.S.
Yeah, and
policy.
I do want to get to the stakes and what those former officials told you. But first, Jim, in your new book, which is out this week, which I have right here,
Thank you.
You issue a warning. You say that we're in this post-Cold War global order, and that the U.S. is in a 1939 moment. Why do you say that?
So I'd been reporting on the deteriorating relationship between the U.S. and Russia for a number of years, written about it, and Russia and our European partners. But when I was in Ukraine in February 2022, when the tanks started rolling across the border and the cruise missiles started falling on Ukrainian cities, it struck me that this was a clean break. Putin had already taken small pieces of Europe before, a piece of Georgia, 2 pieces of Ukraine in 2014, but he was attempting to absorb the largest country in Europe by force of arms. And he had been telegraphing this for some time. It didn't happen as quickly as he wanted, but he's still at it and has killed tens of thousands of people, including many civilians in that process. And that, to me, and I traveled around the world for this book, from Western Europe to Eastern Europe to Asia, and to others that I spoke with, is a challenge not just to the U.S., but to the system we and our allies and much of the world has relied on for 80 years since World War II. A general respect for the sovereignty of borders, open trade lanes, etc. He's challenging that, and there's a parallel to 1939, in that we had a leader like that in 1939, went by the name of Adolf Hitler, who attempted the same thing. And you had many of the same, you had appeasers at the time as well, who said, well, if you give them a little piece, it'll be fine. But I think Churchill's quote about an appeaser is someone who feeds a crocodile and hopes that he will be its last meal applied.
What a great quote from Churchill there. I don't think I'd heard that one. The notion of the appeaser being someone who feeds a crocodile and just hopes that that's the last meal the crocodile will have. It's all right, you can have this part of Europe and then we're done, right? That'll be all right. But Hitler, you won't do that. You can have Sudetenland and then we're done, right? Yeah? Nice one, brother. Ooh. Oh, right. Oh, what? Poland? Oh, okay. Oh, Netherlands, France, Belgium. Oh, hang on. Right. Oh, you're bombing the UK. Oh, dear. Right. Here we are. 2024 or 2022. It's like, yeah, okay. Well, you've already stolen a bit of Ukraine. You got Donbass and Crimea, broadly speaking, and we're like, well, hopefully that was the last bit of food. Oh no, you're coming back for more, and you're wanting more and more. Okay, well maybe we give you this, you'll stop. Like, well, he didn't stop in 2014. It's still going. It's not the last bite that crocodile is going to be eating. He's chomping through Ukraine. And you know what? He'll go on.
Here. When I ask world leaders that same question, is this a 1939 moment, they put it in similar terms.
And
the domestic political calendar isn't just November, though. I mean, we're in the heart now of congressional primary season, where your only threat in some of these Republican districts is a threat to your right, somebody to outflank you on the Trump side. These are the people the speaker will have to go to try to get votes for Ukraine aid. Right now, I think this gets more perilous the further we get into 2024.
That is such an important point. So the votes that are needed to pass this are often people who are maybe moderate Republicans in Republican states, right? Or districts, more importantly. In these Republican districts, and they are thinking, right, I want to give aid to Ukraine, but actually my main threat is not from a Democrat, is from another Republican in some kind of primary. And these guys are seriously not keen on Ukraine aid. So I've got to appeal to that electorate to keep my seat safe, not from Democrats, but from my own party and from someone else who's going to challenge me on that. And that will slide those Republicans in the House further to the right and further away from Ukraine. And that will only get worse the closer we get to November 2024.
Because of those primaries.
And you think that it could very well go beyond the election? Ukraine, that it may not pass before then.
The Congress is going to become more paralyzed as the year moves on, as if it wasn't paralyzed enough already. And I think the calendar works against this in every possible way.
There was some hope as well in the White House, maybe around November, December, when the trade-off, when it was looking like it would be Ukraine aid, as well as money for the South China Sea, as well as for Israel, for border restrictions. I talked to White House officials who were a little optimistic. Just maybe this month, I've been asking those same questions, and I get no articulation of a clear path forward for Ukraine.
I mean, how are they feeling inside the White House about the prospect?
Not good. Not good at this point. They did move forward and thought that they actually proposed immigration restrictions that I know that Trump administration officials were telling me when President Trump was in office that they wanted, they were calling for, raising credible fear, making it harder for asylum seekers. They thought that they gave Republicans an olive branch with that. But when politics, took over with that deal, they're not feeling good about the prospects for Ukraine aid.
We should be clear on Capitol Hill, too. It is 100% true that Speaker Johnson is searching for the votes. He's going to have to use a lot of Democrats. It's usually a death knell for a speaker on a high-profile vote. But it's more than that. Donald Trump's viceroys on Capitol Hill, Marjorie Taylor Greene, are directly threatening him. She said, it might have been 10 days ago, if this aid passes in any form, discharge petition, funny procedures that get around the speaker, any form, Mike Johnson, we will do to you what we did to Kevin McCarthy. That means you're done. That's the threat. And so it's not just, used to be with old speakers, passing big bills with lots of the other party was really, really dangerous. It didn't make you a good general. Now it's that times 10. Now it's, if this passes, you join the ranks of other Republican speakers who've been out.
Especially if it passes with Democratic votes, which he said he may very well have to try it with that. But Jim, you also spoke to...
I mean, that's all just bad news in terms of what the prospects are going forward. It just is not looking good. And this is why Europe is waking up and going, that coffee is pretty smelly now, and we are smelling it. And I think we need to drink it, an awful lot of it, because we got some late nights ahead, making sure that we fill in the gaps where the US would otherwise have been.
Multiple former Trump officials for your book, including retired Marine General John Kelly, who was also former chief of staff to then President Trump. And Kelly told you that a second term with him, speaking about Trump, particularly when he would not be worrying about re-election, it would be fundamentally a catastrophe for us. What are the stakes of a second Trump term?
Think of this. He served 40 years as a Marine general. He's a Gold Star father. This is a serious man who loves his country. And by the way, largely a lifelong Republican, saying Trump is unfit for office, fundamentally a catastrophe. That's a remarkable appraisal to hear from a former chief of staff to a former U.S. president. John Bolton told me, and again, I'm quoting from him directly here, that Trump doesn't have enough of a brain, his words, to articulate a China policy. You couple that with former Vice President Pence saying today he cannot in good conscience endorse him. These are people who worked with him for 4 years, advised him at the highest levels, were in the room with him as he was making consequential decisions about this country, and they judged that decision-making and his priorities to be fundamentally problematic for this country. It's remarkable. And I don't think there's any precedent for that. So when
I can't tell you how freaking important that is. Like I emphasized it earlier. It is so important that the main people who are in the best position to appraise whether Trump is good for the US going forward are those who are saying he's not.
Those appraisals are not coming from journalists. They're not coming from folks on the left or the Democratic Party or rhinos or whatever. They're coming from folks who served in the Trump administration, and we should take pause. We should take pause. John Kelly, by the way, also described to me multiple instances where Trump expressed praise for Adolf Hitler, which is just a remarkable thing to be discussing in the 21st century.
Right, praised Adolf Hitler, praised a number of other dictators.
Putin, Kim, Xi Jinping, you name it.
So all I'd say is that he's probably not the right guy to vote into the White House in November 2024. He will not be good for the US, and he will not be good for global security. The guy loves Viktor Orban. The guy loves Jair Bolsonaro. The guy loves, not that he's in charge anymore, Kim Jong-un. The guy loves Vladimir Putin. And the guy loves Xi Jinping. And it's been on the record saying stuff about those people that no other Western leader would ever say and couch in those kind of terms. The guy loves a strongman leader. He loves a dictator because he wants to be a dictator himself. See what he said on stage the other night about Viktor Orban to Viktor Orban as he gave him a raucous round of applause. It's like, this guy's a great leader. Everyone loves him because he gets to do what he wants. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost entirely what he said. Like, no one argues with his decisions. He gets it. That's like, you are praising him because of his ability to be a dictator. That's what you're doing. You want to be a dictator. He said, I'll be a dictator for a day. My first day in office, says Trump, of his November 2024 prospective win. My first day, I'll be a dictator. And then I saw a montage the other day of Republican voters who say one after the other, I think we need a dictator. I think it'd be great. We need a dictator. Like, literally saying, you've now got Americans like being unconstitutional in their appraisal of where they want the US to go. It's really, really worrying. And it's not cool for the world either. Now you've got Europe scrabbling around trying to do something about it. But do you know what? It would have been a damn sight easier if Congress and the House of particularly the House of Representatives, have passed that bloody aid bill. My goodness, what would the world be like now is if you had Biden in charge of the country in terms of Democrats and McCain in charge of the Republicans as a prospective president for 2024. If those two are running against each other, none of us would be having arguments in the threads about whether Trump's mental or not. We'd just be like, just like it is in the UK with the Tories and Labour, it's like, well, we all agree. Obviously, we agree on Ukraine. Of course, we fricking agree on Ukraine, because Ukraine are clearly the good guys and Russia are clearly the bad guys, and Putin's mental, right? Because we just got it right in the UK as far as bipartisan support goes. But there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. There's something rotten in the US if you have one party that appears to be sliding towards being fans of dictatorships and being fans of Russia. Just so freaking worrying. And the best thing, and I don't want this to be a partisan channel at all, but the best thing I see for November 2024, because I'm so obsessed with Ukraine, is a democratic trifecta. I can't see that any other outcome will benefit Ukraine. It just won't. There needs to be a message to the MAGA wing to say there needs to be a complete repudiation of that movement. There needs to be either the Republican Party needs to split in two, but I think that just screw the Republicans going forward. You split the vote. So if you're a moderate Republican, you won't want that really. Although you'd end up having a party that's more representative. And actually, the US could really do with a multi-party system. Like the narrowest form of democracy is not cool for representation. There's the whole spectrum of political thought and opinion in the US has to be thrown into one of two pots. And that is not representative. At the moment in the UK, we're starting on that road. We used to be a two-party system. We're now sort of getting to a multi-party system. Europe, with proportional representation and alternative voting systems, is already there by and large. Right? The UK, we don't have proportional representation. We have first past the post and a very narrow democratic system, but it is on the way. US is not there, and so you've got a problem. But so Republicans are like, well, it's either Trump or nothing. And where's the representation for those moderates? Are they prepared to hold their nose and vote Democrat, or do they go third party that's got no hope, or do they just not go to the ballot box? Because I think it is that dangerous, this kind of newfound MAGA movement and direction. I think it's dangerous for the US, and it's dangerous for everyone else around the world. So I don't know. There are plenty of you moderate Republicans out there watching. Hopefully, I'm trying to say, do you know what? A McCain Republicanism would be brilliant right now, but it's not there. What are you guys doing? How do you guys feel? Take care, guys. Speak soon.